Tom Brady said something that is so true. It is so true. And yet nobody knows it. It's true. I shouldn't say nobody knows it because people who know football get it. And that is putting the onus on defensive players to hit offensive players in a manner that does not hurt them. Okay? Forget about the strike zone. That is always should be on the defensive. Like, don't lead with your helmet. See what you hit. Don't go, like, hit in the strike zone. But sometimes there are violent hits that are not the fault of the defender. They're the fault of the offensive players involved. What do I mean by that? Here's Tom Brady in a what appears to be in-house sort of symposium. Gronk's to his right, Mike Evans to his left, and the subject matter in question comes up.
I think the one thing about football that's changed over the years, which I think is really hard for someone like me who's played a long time to watch, is like it's not being taught the right way. Like a quarterback should only throw the ball to certain places because your receiver is in danger of getting hit. For example, when I used to play against Ray Lewis, I wouldn't throw the ball to the middle of the field because he'd go after you and he would hit and we didn't always have the biggest receivers, but he would hit him and knock him out of the game. And now every hard hit is a penalty on the defense. So I feel like they penalize defensive players for offensive mistakes. So, like, if a quarterback, I was watching the Chicago Bear game, the quarterback messes up, doesn't see the blitzer, or the line screws up. I don't know what happened. But the quarterback or the line on offense, the defensive player comes in and hits him hard, and they throw a flag on the defense. So they've almost moved the protection of your opponent to you, as opposed to where it should be, which is on yourself. Like, if you're a quarterback, you got to protect yourself and your players. It shouldn't be the responsibility of your opponent to protect you. And I think that's it creates really bad habits for players because you feel like I can basically do anything. I could run and not slide. I can throw my receiver into any coverage and not have any repercussion for it. The only thing they're going to do is they're actually going to blame the defensive player for making a good, solid hit, and now the defensive player is going to feel like, oh, I can't do that, even though I feel like it was an offensive mistake. So in the end, I think it's a really disservice to the sport because the sport isn't being played at a high level like I believe that it once was. It actually deteriorates because you're not teaching the players the reasons and the fundamentals of what the sport should be.
And part of that might be in the fact that the rule emphasis about hitting a player considered to be defenseless being on the defensive player to make sure it doesn't happen rather than the offensive player, like Tom is saying. Tom's not saying that defensive players shouldn't be penalized for an illegal hit. It's just that in the flash of an eye, when something violent looks violent, they're throwing a flag on a defender when it's really the offensive player's fault for creating the collision. And part of that comes from a huge re-emphasis on the rule that happened one weekend many years ago. If you remember, there were 3 huge hits. Brandon Merriweather went top rope on top of Todd Heap.
That was the
Muhammad Massaquoi got blown up by James Harrison. And then the one play in question, remember, Dante Robinson blew up Deshaun Jackson.
Yep.
And Marshall Faulk, our buddy, Mr. Football Heaven, first ballot Hall of Famer who knows exactly where to be on every play because he not only knows the route, he not only knows the quarterback, he knows the defensive scheme pre-snap because he's studied his ass off. And he knows where you need to be because if you're in that spot, and the defense is there, you're going to get hit. And the quarterback needs to know, don't lead my receiver into that spot. The defense is playing properly in its defense. You should know what defense you're running your route against pre-snap and certainly mid-play. And if you're going to keep running when you should sit down and your quarterback leads you to not sit down but to keep running, that's on the offensive player. You're creating the collision that you should be avoiding because you should know the defense that's being played against you. You should know the tendency pre-snap, and you should know what it looks like when you're running the play. And Marshall came on game day morning the next week and was the only one I heard throughout the entire process, because everyone was saying Dante Robinson shouldn't do that. He was the one who said Deshaun Jackson's the one who didn't sit. He kept running. And his quarterback let him into it. And the problem on that play wasn't Robinson. It was Deshaun Jackson not knowing what the hell he was doing. And that's Brady talking truth. And a lot of players, unfortunately, well, look, for them, they don't have Brady's 20 years plus of experience and greatness. But a lot of quarterbacks need to know this stuff. And certainly this is why coaches tell receivers and running backs, you shouldn't just know your route. You should know the route tree for everybody on the field, because you might be in that position and you need to know the defenses. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's why you don't put young quarterbacks and young receivers and running backs out there, because they don't know what the hell they're doing and they're going to get blown up. But right now it looks like the defender is going to be on the hook for that flag. And Brady's saying that's wrong. And there are a bunch of people who are retweeting this saying, yep, yes, sir. Hosanna.
That videos are like 2 million views right now.
Hosanna. Know the game is what he's saying. Play it at a higher level. Play it at a higher level. You playing it at a higher level and knowing your P's and Q's or your X, Y's, and Z's will make a safer game. It's wild stuff. And it's amazing that here it's 2021 and Brady's saying this publicly and people are like, he's saying what? What is he saying? It should be on the offensive players to stay safe, not the defensive players. Yeah, the defensive players have got to hit in the strike zone. Sometimes the violent hits that are taking place that draw a flag are not on the defenders because they didn't, hold up. But why should they hold up if the offensive player and quarterback leading them to a spot that they should know pre-snap and mid-play not to do? That's what Brady's saying. And I heard Marshall say it years ago on game day morning, and we were all like, what? What are you going to say tomorrow? It's on Deshaun Jackson? Yeah. That's what he said. Now here we are, years later, Brady's saying it. Maybe that's why they're going to both have busts in the same room one day. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.